It was October 1902, as thousands of black-shirted men marched toward Rome. The Italian government panicked. Trains were halted. Telephone lines buzzed. King Victor Emmanuel III was urged to declare martial law, but instead, he handed over the keys, and Benito Mussolini, a former journalist from a small town in Emilia-Romagna, became the youngest prime minister in Italian history. No gun had been fired, no law had been passed, and yet Italy had crossed a threshold it would not return from for decades. This is the story of Benito Mussolini, the journalist who marched Italy into darkness, how speeches became orders, how ambition became violence, and how a nation's future was consumed by a single man's hunger for power. Benito Mussolini. Andrea Mussolini was born on July 29, 1883. In the town of Predoppio, in northern Italy, his father Alessandro was a blacksmith, a socialist, a revolutionary, and a fierce opponent of the Italian monarchy. His mother, Rosa, was a devout Catholic and a schoolteacher from a young age. Benito was caught between these two poles, rebellion and tradition. He grew up idolizing revolutionaries like Garibaldi and Marx, but also steeped in the discipline of the classroom. He was bright but volatile. He was expelled from school multiple times for fighting, and later fled to Switzerland to avoid military service. There he immersed himself in socialist circles, writing articles, organizing strikes, and developing a reputation as a firebrand thinker. In 1912, at age 29, he became editor of Avanti, the official newspaper of the Italian Socialist Party. His pen was sharp, his style electrifying. Under his leadership, circulation soared, but beneath his fiery rhetoric, another ambition stirred, not just to shape history but to dominate. It dot from Marx to nationalism. When World War I erupted in 1914, Mussolini stunned his comrades. The Socialist Party, like most leftist movements in Europe, opposed the war as a conflict between imperial powers. But Mussolini broke ranks. He argued that war would cleanse Italy, create a new revolutionary spirit, that out of blood would rise a stronger, more unified nation. He was expelled from the party. He resigned from Avanti, and within weeks he had founded a new paper, Il Popolo d'Italia, the people of Italy. It was pro-war, nationalist, and unapologetically muscular in tone. Mussolini himself enlisted in 1915 and served at the front, but a mortar accident the next year ended his military career. Back in Milan, he watched Italy's war effort falter and the post-war peace unravel. The economy collapsed, inflation soared, unemployment spread, veterans returned to poverty, workers struck, peasants seized land. The government, liberal and fragile, seemed powerless amid the chaos. Mussolini saw opportunity in March 1919. Mussolini gathered a group of ex-soldiers, nationalists, and former leftists in a Milan hall. He called the meeting the Fasci di Combattimento, the fighting groups. The name came from the fasces, a Roman symbol of power, a bundle of rods bound together. Sometimes with an axe. It was a symbol of strength for unity and punishment for dissent. Fascism had no clear ideology, yet it promised everything: an end to class conflict, the revival of the Roman spirit, the crushing of both capitalism and communism. What it offered above all was action. The fascists wore black shirts, they marched through streets, they broke up strikes, beat leftist organizers, and attacked socialist newspapers. The state did little to stop them. Many in the elite welcomed the violence better, they thought, than a Bolshevik revolution. Mussolini was still a fringe figure in 1920, but by 1921, he had been elected to parliament. The fascists were gaining ground, and Mussolini had set his eyes on the capital. In October 1922, Mussolini made his move. He threatened to seize power unless he was appointed prime minister. Thousands of fascist squads, many armed, began marching on Rome from across the country. The government prepared to resist, but King Victor Emmanuel III refused to sign the emergency decree for martial law. He feared civil war, or worse, the collapse of the monarchy. So instead, he invited Mussolini to form a government. On October 31, 1922, Mussolini stood before the king, dressed in black, just 39 years old, and accepted the mandate to lead. Italy's democracy did not collapse overnight, but it had been fatally compromised at first. Mussolini governed cautiously. He maintained alliances with conservatives, monarchists, and the church. But step by step, he dismantled opposition. Censorship tightened. Political parties were banned. A secret police, the OVRA, was created. In 1924, a socialist member of parliament, Giacomo Matteotti, publicly accused Mussolini of electoral fraud and fascist violence. Weeks later, Matteotti was kidnapped and murdered. The outcry was enormous. Many feared Mussolini would fall, but he survived. And in 1925, he made his regime official. "I alone assumed the political, moral, and historical responsibility," he declared. "If fascism is a criminal association, then I am its leader." The dictatorship had begun. Mussolini called himself Il Duce, the leader. He cultivated an image of strength, bare-chested in photographs, skiing in the Alps, inspecting troops. His face appeared on posters, coins, and schoolbooks. His speeches were broadcast across Italy. Fascism reached into every corner of life. From education to labor to art, children were taught to chant, "Mussolini is always right." Dissent was crushed, jails filled, exiles fled. Mussolini promised a revived Italy, one that would rebuild the Empire of Rome, and many believed him. In 1935, Mussolini invaded Ethiopia, one of the few independent African nations. The campaign was brutal. Italian forces used chemical weapons. Civilians were massacred, but in Italy, it was seen as a triumph. The League of Nations condemned the invasion, but did nothing to stop it, isolated from the West. Mussolini turned to a new ally, Adolf Hitler. At first, Mussolini had mocked the Nazis, but by 1938 he had fully aligned Italy with Germany. He introduced anti-Semitic laws, mimicking Nazi racial policy, stripping Jews of rights, banning intermarriage, even removing Jewish professors. And when World War II erupted in 1939, Mussolini hesitated but could not resist the urge for glory. In June 1940, as France was collapsing, he entered the war. "I only need a few thousand dead," he reportedly said, "so I can sit at the peace table as a victor." But victory never came. Italy's military was ill-prepared. Campaigns in Greece and North Africa failed. The alliance with Hitler became a trap. By 1943, Allied forces landed in Sicily. Bombs fell on Rome. Morale collapsed. On July 25, 1943, the fascist Grand Council turned on Mussolini. The king had him arrested. For 2 years, he had been Italy's master. Now he was a prisoner, but his story did not end there. Hitler, refusing to lose an ally, ordered a daring rescue. German commandos freed Mussolini from a mountain prison and installed him as the puppet leader of a Nazi-controlled regime in northern Italy, the Italian Social Republic. It was a hollow state marked by executions, terror, and civil war. By April 1945, the end had come. As Allied troops advanced, Mussolini tried to flee to Switzerland. Disguised as a German soldier, he was captured by Italian partisans near Lake Como. On April 28, 1945, he was executed, along with his mistress Clara Petacci there. Bodies were taken to Milan and hung upside down in a public square, jeered, spat on, reviled. The man who had once commanded cheers from balconies now hung as a warning. Mussolini's regime left deep scars on Italy. It had promised strength, order, and rebirth. It delivered violence, ruin, and war. Yet even today, his image is contested. Some remember him as a others, rightly, as the architect of dictatorship. But history remembers not only what he built, but how he built it. Through fear, through spectacle, through the slow erosion of freedom. One law, one slogan, one silence at a time. Mussolini did not seize power with guns. He walked through a door left open, and by the time it closed, it was too late to turn back.